The wind arrived before the sound of hoofbeats, rolling down from the high passes like a warning whispered too late. Snow lifted from the ridgeline and scattered across the valley floor in thin, cutting sheets, turning the world pale and indistinct. A man stood alone at the edge of a ravine, boots sunk into crusted ice, breath breaking the air into white shards. One wrong step and the mountain would take him. One more night like this, and the cold would finish what the war had started. He had learned to read weather the way other men read faces. The sky had that hard, hollow blue that meant pain was coming. He tightened the strap of his pack, fingers clumsy in the cold, and stared down into the dark cut of the earth. Somewhere below, water moved under ice, patient and relentless. It would outlast him. Everything would. His name had once meant something to someone. It had been shouted across a camp, carved into a rifle stock, written in a hand that trembled when the ink ran low. Up here, names were useless. The mountain didn't ask who you were. It only asked whether you could endure. That he turned away from the ravine and followed a narrow game trail into the timber. Pines leaned inward like conspirators. Snow creaked beneath his steps, loud in the silence. Each breath burned. Each exhale felt like a confession he wasn't ready to make. He had come to the high country to disappear. After the guns went quiet and the flags were folded, he carried home a body that still worked and a mind that didn't. The towns were too loud. The nights were worse. Faces blurred into the same accusing shape. He had tried prayer once, in a ruined chapel with no roof, kneeling on broken pews while snow fell through the open sky. The words stuck in his throat. He left before dawn and never went back. By the time the first trees thinned, the storm was on him. Wind shoved him sideways. Snow erased the trail as soon as he made it. He pushed on because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the moment when he'd chosen wrong and lived with it, that he found the smoke by accident, that it was a thin thread, barely there, but it was wrong in the right way, gray against white, moving with purpose. He followed it downhill, heart hammering with a hope he refused to name. Shelter meant fire. Fire meant another morning. The structure crouched against a rock face, half buried, roof sagging under old snow. Stone walls blackened by time. A cross of rough wood leaned crookedly beside the door, lashed together with wire. He stopped 10 paces out, listening. Wind. The soft, steady crackle of a hearth. He knocked once. The sound felt rude in the quiet. Nothing. He knocked again, harder, then stepped back, ready to leave if the door opened on a barrel. Out here, mercy was a rumor. The door creaked. Warmth spilled into the cold like a held breath finally released. A figure filled the doorway, tall, broader than he expected, wrapped in heavy wool. A hood shadowed the face. For a moment they regarded each other, two animals measuring risk. He lowered his gaze first. Not submission, just exhaustion. That a hand moved, slow and deliberate, gesturing him inside. The chapel was small and clean. A simple altar faced the back wall, a candle guttering in a shallow dish. The fire was set into stone, the heat a blessing that hurt. He took off his pack, set it down carefully, and stood with his hands at his sides, unsure what to do with them. The figure pulled back the hood. A woman, her hair cut short and practical, eyes steady and unafraid. A nun's habit, worn and mended, hung from her shoulders. She looked carved rather than soft, as if the mountain had shaped her with wind and prayer. She said nothing. She poured water into a tin cup and held it out. He took it, fingers brushing metal, and drank too fast. It spilled down his chin. He wiped it away, embarrassed by the suddenness of need. She set bread on the table, dark and dense. He ate slowly this time, aware of her watching not with suspicion but with attention, as if each movement told her something useful. Outside, the storm leaned its weight against the walls and failed. Inside, the fire spoke in low tones. He felt the old urge to explain himself, to confess every wrong as if they were stones he could set down. He swallowed it. Words had betrayed him before. She gestured toward a bench near the fire. He sat. Heat seeped into his bones, painful and kind. His hands shook. He tucked them under his thighs. Only then did she speak, voice quiet, almost swallowed by the room. "You can stay until the weather breaks." Relief hit him so hard he had to close his eyes. He nodded. Gratitude was a heavy thing. It bent his spine. She turned back to her work, mending a tear in wool, movements economical. Silence settled again, but it was a different silence now, shared. Night came early. The candle burned low. He lay on a pallet near the hearth, staring up at the beams, watching shadows move like slow water. Sleep came in fragments. When he dreamed, he was back on a ridge with men shouting below, and the choice was there again, sharp as a blade. He woke to a sound that wasn't wind, but a breath. Caught and released, he turned his head. She sat at the altar, hands folded, shoulders squared. The candle's flame trembled. He could see the strain in her posture, the way stillness cost her something. That he rolled onto his side, careful not to disturb the fire. He wanted to ask her why she was here, alone in a place that wanted to kill you. He wanted to ask her what she had run from, what had driven her up into the cold. He asked nothing. Morning revealed a world scoured clean. The storm had passed, leaving the sky brittle and bright. He stepped outside, squinting, and took in the valley spread below like a map of scars and veins. Smoke rose straight up now, no wind to carry it away. She stood beside him, gaze on the horizon. The cross leaned between them, wood silvered by weather. "They'll come," she said, not looking at him. "Who?" The word came out rough. "Men who don't like quiet places," she said. "Men who think what they want is owed to them." He thought of towns and notices nailed crooked to posts, of names inked beneath crude drawings. He nodded once. She met his eyes then, searching not for strength but for truth. You can leave before they do. He considered the path he'd climbed, already half erased. He considered the warmth behind him. He considered the way the mountain had offered him a choice and how he had learned to make the wrong one quickly. "I'll help," he said, and meant it in a way that surprised him. She studied his face, reading the lines the war had written there. At last she inclined her head, a small acceptance that felt like a vow. They spent the day preparing without ceremony. He stacked wood. She salted what little meat she had. They moved around each other with care, learning the shape of shared space. Once their hands brushed passing a bundle, and both stilled, startled by the simple fact of touch. Nothing more followed. It didn't need that. As dusk fell, he stood watch at the edge of the trees. The valley held its breath. Somewhere far below, a sound carried, a laugh, sharp and careless. He tightened his coat, feeling the mountain at his back and the chapel's small light behind him. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faintest trace of smoke, not their own. The storm had been a warning. This was the beginning. The first shot cracked the stillness like a tree, splitting in frost. That IT came from the lower valley, distant but deliberate, a sound meant to announce presence rather than kill. Birds burst from the tree line in a frantic cloud. The man stiffened, every muscle remembering a language he wished he'd forgotten. He didn't run. Running was for when fear owned you. He listened instead, counting heartbeats, tracking echoes the way the mountains taught you to. Behind him, the chapel door opened without a sound. She stood there, already dressed for cold and movement, a pack slung over one shoulder. No panic in her face, only resolve. "They're close," he said. She nodded. "Closer than yesterday." They moved uphill first, not down. It was a mistake men from towns always made, thinking pursuit flowed naturally with gravity. The mountain didn't care about convenience. It rewarded those who understood patience and punished those who rushed. Be why mid-morning the wind returned, not howling, just enough to erase details. Snow softened edges. The world turned to shapes and shadows. They climbed in silence, breath measured, boots placed where rock showed through. Once, he reached back without looking, palm open. She took it. Her grip was firm, unafraid. He felt something settle in his chest, an unfamiliar weight that wasn't pain. They found refuge beneath a ledge where the rock bent outward like a protective shoulder. From there, the valley opened below them. Figures moved through the trees, 3 at first, then more. Dark coats, rifles slung careless, confident. One man laughed, the sound thin at this distance that he studied them the way he'd studied enemy lines once, noting how they spread too wide, trusting numbers instead of sense. Bounty hunters, maybe, or men who called themselves righteous because it sounded better than cruel. "They won't stop," he said. "No," she replied. "They never do." They waited until the men passed beneath their position, then slipped away sideways, traversing across a face that punished the careless. I said beneath powder. Once her foot slid. He caught her by the wrist, yanking her back with a grunt that tore from his throat. They stood pressed together for a moment, hearts loud in their ears. She met his eyes, gratitude flickering there, then pulled away, the moment sealed without words. By afternoon, hunger crept in. They shared what little they had, breaking bread with gloved hands. He noticed how she always took the smaller portion without thinking. He pushed his back toward her when she wasn't looking. She noticed anyway and didn't refuse. Instead, she met his eyes and allowed a faint, tired smile. They found signs of old life as the lights slanted low. A burned-out cabin, walls collapsed inward, a child's carved toy half buried near the door. She paused there, fingers hovering over the little wooden horse. Her jaw tightened. He saw something old and sharp pass through her, like a storm remembered. She knelt and set the toy upright, as if correcting a wrong that could still be corrected. Then she stood and walked on. Night fell fast. They made a fire where the smoke would be swallowed by rock. Flames kept low and disciplined. He took first watch. She slept sitting up, back against stone, breath even despite the cold. He envied that, sleep without bargaining. While the fire whispered, he took from his pack a folded paper, creased soft by handling. He hadn't meant to show anyone. He unfolded it anyway. A letter, ink faded, words few and careful. An apology that didn't ask forgiveness. A promise to be better that had come too late. He didn't notice her wake until she was beside him, gaze not on the letter but on his face. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said. The words landed gently, like snow on an open hand. He folded the paper and tucked it away, not ready to release it, but lighter for having been seen. T. Dawn. the storm found them again, harsher this time. Wind tore at the ridge, visibility shrinking to nothing. They moved blind, guided by memory and instinct. Once a shot cracked close enough to send rock chips flying. He shoved her down behind a boulder, body covering hers without thought. The moment stretched, breath against breath, the world reduced to pressure and trust. When the shooting stopped, they crawled away on hands and knees, the mountain roaring its disapproval. He led them into a stand of twisted trees where the ground dropped suddenly, hidden by snow. They slid, tumbled, came up bruised but alive, laughter tearing out of him in a sound he didn't recognize. She stared at him, then laughed too, soft, disbelieving, human. The laughter died when they saw the tracks ahead. Boots. Fresh, leading toward a narrow pass that funneled movement like a throat. An ambush waiting to happen. She closed her eyes for a moment, fingers pressed to the bridge of her nose. When she opened them, the choice was already made. There's another way, she said. It's longer, harder. He didn't ask why she knew. He trusted the way she said it. They turned away from the pass and climbed into punishment. Ice tore at their palms. Wind burned their cheeks raw. Time stretched and compressed, losing meaning. Once, he stumbled and would have gone down the slope if she hadn't jammed her staff into a crack and hauled back with a strength that surprised him. He looked at her then with something like awe. She looked away, embarrassed by nothing at all. Near sunset, they reached a narrow saddle overlooking a hidden basin. Smoke rose there, not theirs, not the hunters'. A camp, quiet, careful. An old man sat by the fire, back bent, hair white as the snow, a rifle across his knees. He didn't reach for it when they approached. He watched them the way a tree watches weather. "You're being followed," the old man said, voice dry as bark. "Yes," she replied. He nodded. "I saw them. Loud men." He offered them soup without ceremony. They ate like people who had learned not to ask why kindness appeared. When the old man spoke again, it was to the man, eyes sharp beneath age. "You know how to stand your ground." The man considered the question, the answer, the weight of both. "I know how to choose," he said finally. The old man grunted approval. "That'll do." They slept under the old man's watch. In the night, the hunters came, shadows slipping through trees. The old man's rifle cracked once, twice. Short, final. The echoes rolled away and didn't return at the T-dawn. They buried the old man where he fell, stones stacked careful against scavengers. She traced a simple mark in the snow. He bowed his head, feeling the cost of survival settle deeper. When they moved on, the basin behind them quieted, smoke thinning into nothing. The past was catching up, but so was something else. A bond forged not by words but by shared breath in thin air. Ahead, the mountain waited, indifferent and vast. And somewhere beyond the next rise, the reckoning was drawing near. The ridge cut the sky like a jagged scar. Dawn spilled weak light across the snow, painting the world in shades of gray and silver. He led the way, careful, boots silent on hard-packed ice. She followed, cloak drawn tight, eyes scanning for movement that didn't belong. The valley below whispered with a memory of pursuit. They had survived storms, ambushes, hunger, but the mountain had one last test. The hunters had learned patience. Men like that never gave up easily. The sound of their boots was gone, replaced by a presence that weighed on the air. Someone waiting, watching, deciding. He slowed, hand resting on the hilt of a knife he hadn't wanted to draw in decades. Survival had taught him to prepare. Even when he hoped it wouldn't come to that, a narrow pass opened before them, cliffs rising like silent sentinels. He saw the tracks first, fresh, deep in the snow. Not enough to count, but enough to warn. He stopped, turned to her. Her face was calm, unreadable. She had learned the mountain's lessons faster than he had. They didn't speak. No words could carry the weight of what was coming. They moved cautiously, step by careful step. The pass funneled them like water through stone. Any misstep, any distraction, and they would be sitting ducks. He thought of every choice that had brought him here, every failure and moment of courage. He was tired, but the mountain demanded more. Halfway through the pass, a shout shattered the quiet. Figures appeared at the top, rifles raised, voices low and sharp. There was no hesitation. Instinct took over. He pushed her down behind a rock, body pressed to hers, breath loud in the cold air. Snow sprayed from a boot, a warning. The first shot cracked and ricocheted off stone. They moved in unison, sliding, crawling, the world reduced to motion and survival. He saw a narrow ledge and pointed. Without words, they scrambled along it, snow underfoot threatening to betray them. The hunters followed, but the ledge was treacherous, the mountain unforgiving. One man slipped, caught only by a branch that ripped from the rock. He tumbled into the abyss, silence swallowing the scream. The others hesitated. That was enough. That'd be why the time they reached a safer slope. The sun had risen higher, casting long shadows that hid movement. They paused, both breathing hard, faces streaked with frost and dirt. She looked at him, eyes searching. No words, only the understanding that they had survived the first wave of the storm. They pressed on, descending into a hidden basin the mountain had carved long before men walked its ridges. Their life seemed to hold its breath. A stream cut through the snow, water moving too fast to freeze. Trees leaned inward, forming a natural shelter. They drank, washed, tried to claim a moment of peace, but the mountain never allowed complete reprieve. The tracks were close again, and he knew it, knew that the choices they made next would decide everything. He studied her for a long moment. She had the same look he had seen in himself that morning, the same fire buried under layers of survival and grief. She was ready. They set a plan without words. Smoke low, fire controlled, paths carefully chosen. The hunters would come, and they would have to meet them, not with fear, but with the lessons the mountain had carved into their bodies. He readied the knife, checked his pack, and for the first time, let himself feel the weight of trust. She was beside him, eyes steady. Neither spoke. That was their bond. Action instead of speech, understanding instead of questions. The ambush came with the quiet inevitability of the earth itself. Figures moved in the snow like shadows given form. He stayed low, heart hammering. She moved with him, silent and exact. Shots rang out. Snow exploded. Rocks splintered. Each breath was measured. Each heartbeat counted. When it was over, the hunters were gone, scattered or wounded, leaving only echoes. Silence returned, deeper and heavier than before. He exhaled, realizing he had barely noticed the trembling in his own hands. She turned to him, expression unreadable, but in her eyes he saw relief. And something else, respect, recognition of a shared ordeal that words could never capture. They stayed that night in the basin, fire low, sleep elusive. When he finally lay down, he thought of every moment that had brought him here, Every wrong choice, every risk, every hand extended in trust. He realized that survival had changed its shape. It wasn't just about staying alive. It was about learning to live again, to allow someone else to walk beside you without fear. Morning came, crisp and bright. The mountain no longer seemed a threat, only a silent witness. They packed, moved carefully, and began the descent to lower valleys. The journey ahead would be long. The hunters might return. Life would still be hard, but they had survived the storm together, and that made all the difference. At the edge of the trees, she stopped. He noticed a faint smile, a small concession to human warmth. "We go down," she said softly. "There is life there. People who do not wish to kill us for breathing." He nodded. "Then we go." They stepped into the forest, snow crunching underfoot, leaving the mountain behind, but carrying its lessons in their bones. Trust, endurance, and courage were the spoils of the high country. They would face more storms, more shadows, but they had learned to move through them together. And as the sun rose fully over the ridge, it caught the snow in a blaze of light, a reminder that even in the harshest places, beauty survived. The wind whispered behind them, not as threat, but as witness. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that he might survive, not just the mountain, but himself. The story did not promise happiness or safety, but promised choice, and in the end, that was everything. If you've ever faced a storm you thought you could not survive, remember this. Endurance is built one step at a time, and trust can light even the darkest path. Share your story below and let someone else know they are not alone.